Hello folks, I'm gonna try and keep the screaming minimal for this episode. Reason should be obvious given the fact that making rant views is quite exhausting. So here we're starting this marathon for real with 2007's Ratchet Clank Future Tools of Destruction for the PlayStation 3. Well, in Europe the game is just Ratchet Clank Tools of Destruction, but over here Tools of Destruction, Quest for Booty, and A Crack in Time all have the Future subtitle. That doesn't have much bearing on anything since it's just a name, so I'll just call them Tools of Destruction, Quest for Booty, and A Crack in Time going forward. But to jump the gun a bit, I'm really excited to replay these three games once more since I haven't played any of them in years. Or well, since January of 2015. But still, it's been a while all things considered, seeing as for me it's always been a thing that I just don't revisit these games nearly as much as I do the classics. Are all of the classics better? Not necessarily, but like I said last time, the 4 PS2 Ratchet games made by Insomniac are some of my favorite games to revisit. So much so that I've gone back to each of them at least once a year since the HD Collection and HD Port of Deadlock came out in 2012. And I'll continue to keep doing that, making the inevitable re-reviews in 2025 all the easier. In other words, one of the reasons I'm excited for this mini-marathon is because I can play these childhood favorites again and see if they stack up against the classics well, all the while adding new meaningful content to the Ratchet formula, making the jump to the new console a substantial one, or if there was a reason why I don't revisit them all that much to begin with. I can tell you right now, nostalgia is certainly not the reason, seeing as I have just as many memories with these games, maybe more so than the likes of Ratchet 1, Up Your Arsenal, or Deadlocked. I have a bit of a story to tell. As I've said in many videos, my console of choice as a youngster was the PlayStation 2. With it, I experienced love at first sight. Okay, maybe that's going a bit too far. But still, I played plenty of licensed trash and the occasional good licensed game on the PS2. But there, I played several games and series I still cherish to this day, such as the obvious Sly, Ratchet, and Jack. But there, I also played other games like Crash 1 and Crash 2, the classic and 3D Sonic games, Tak and Tai, and the list goes on and on and on. Around the middle of the decade, the next generation had arrived, and like everyone else, I had gotten a Wii, but I had my eyes on the PlayStation 3. I mean, I grew up on the PS2, why wouldn't I want a PS3? That lust was supported by this commercial.
Ratchet and Clank Future, Tools of Destruction, only on PlayStation 3, starting at $3.99.
But of course,
$599 US.
So yeah, that was gonna have to wait. But I did get my hands on a 360 at least, or in other words, the Sonic 06 machine, but that's neither here nor there. In 2010, the game to end all games was announced, Heroes on the Move. Honestly, I never thought a game this amazing could ever come out. So not only was I missing out on 3 whole new Ratchet games, but also this Sly Cooper collection remastering my favorite games, and now the crossover to end all crossovers? It was settled. In 2010, I got my hands on a refurbished PS3 Fat model immediately, and with it I got my hands on Tools of Destruction and A Crack in Time. But TOD didn't work because of some technical jargon that went way over my head at the time, so I played A Crack in Time, but I'll talk more about that in 2 videos. Later going on to play Quest for Booty, the Sly Collection, and that pile of hot garbage, PlayStation Move Heroes, which I shall not speak the name again, until the time comes for that epic rant view. So TOD was the last in the trilogy I played, and that was in 2011. I can't get over the fact that this game is now like 10 years old. So that's what this whole video is all about. How does Tools of Destruction stack up as a decade-old PS3 launch title, a game I have 6 years worth of experience playing, and most importantly, a game I haven't touched in about 2.5 years? Well, let's find out. The story begins on Kerwan Metropolis as Ratchet and Clank, much like always, are doing something to pass the time, and in this game's case, it's fixing up a hover bike. That is until Captain Quark makes an emergency transmission alerting them that the city is under attack by an army of heavily armed robotic commandos, thus setting up the intro. Which, when playing it again, I was surprised to see how automated it is at times. Previous games have done tutorials in these bits, but not much else. We do get to experiment with the controls a bit, but there are many grind rail sections and a free-falling part as well as dash pads that send you flying. I'm guessing the reason for this was because this was a new console and therefore the developers decided to take you on a ride throughout the city while spectacular things are happening all around you, such as lasers blowing up buildings and giant spider bots blasting at ships in the sky as the road crumbles beneath your feet. The word to sum it all up would be spectacle. None of this is particularly challenging, but they wanted to show you just how much more advanced this new game is in comparison to the PS2 saga. I'm absolutely fine with this, seeing as this is a really fun intro. The 2 weapons we're given are fun to use, and the enemies are satisfying to beat as it should be, with little nooks and crannies to check out around every corner. It's like the developers are saying, don't worry, this is going to be the same Ratchet you all know and love, but even bigger and better. It probably could have ended a few minutes earlier, seeing as it does run for about 10 minutes, but still. I find it interesting that it takes place on Metropolis. It's interesting because it's almost like this level was used as a tech demo for each new PlayStation console, since this was a very impressive level in the first Ratchet & Clank on PS2 with how vast it seemed and how many ships were flying through the sky at once. I already described the spectacle provided when playing through this level in Tools of Destruction, and while not an early release PS4 game, the Ratchet Clank PS4 game have brought us back to this familiar locale once again with the spectacular graphics and occasionally good lighting from that game being shown off quite a bit in the trailers in this very level. The ending of this sequence being the introduction to Emperor Percival Tachyon.
Your name's Percival?
Emperor! See the crown, see the scepter, the giant walking throne, and legion of loyal robotic commandos, Emperor!
Once they escape, the story gets going since Ratchet & Clank hop from planet to planet in what easily becomes the most complicated Ratchet plot to date, since they go to hunt down the truth behind the disappearance of the Lombaxes and their devastating weapon, the Lombax Secret, aka the Dimensionator. Along the way, they meet several new characters such as the Explorer, Talwyn Apogee, and her robotic guardians, Kronk and Zephyr, or the new side villains like Captain Romulus Slag and his trusted sidekick, Rusty Pete. And with them, they have a full crew of pirates to battle Ratchet, as well as interacting with old characters like the Plumber and Captain Quark as they try to find the Dimensionator before Tachyon can use it to return his race, the Kragmites, to this dimension, since the Lombaxes used the Dimensionator to banish the Kragmites many years ago. In addition to that, Clank is aided by these alien creatures called the Zoni that Ratchet denies the existence of. And that's the Cliff Notes version of the story. As a story, Tools of Destruction's really good. I don't think it tops any of the stories in the first 4 games, but I'll start with the villain, Percival Tachyon. I can't decide if I'm supposed to take him seriously or not. He's just too over the top for my liking. I can tell that despite being a pretty heinous villain, Dr. Nefarious was meant to be funny first and foremost. You could argue that this is a flaw with the story of Up Your Arsenal more than it is a plus, but I just can't get enough of him.
I have no choice but to throw myself on your mercy.
Really? I mean, that's right, Nefarious. Your reign of terror is finally...
Sucker!
All the while still finding the stakes to be the highest they had been up to that point in the series. Similar to Nefarious, during one of the most crucial moments when Tachyon gets his hand on the Dimensionator, it's a pretty funny scene.
Finally, the time has come for the Kragmites to rise again. To rise again. To rise again.
But Nefarious was not the one who had been preaching to Ratchet about being the last of his race, now he should give up the mission and return home to the other cowardly Lombaxes, or so he says anyway. To be fair, he did try to tell Clank to join his side, but that seemed more like a parody of that story trope since Clank didn't give it a second's thought, and then it was dropped in the story. Also this.
Squishy lot.
Oh, Len, I can't. It's not right. You're my cousin's uncle's son.
Stuff like this creates a disconnect for me, making it unclear if Tachyon is a serious antagonist like Drek, a serious villain with some funny moments like Vox, or a total ham like Nefarious. That's not to say I don't like him, seeing as the vocal performance by Andy Morris is very well done and the humorous moments are just as good.
Emperor Tachyon is an equal opportunity oppressor.
Where it's really at with the villains would be Captain Slag and Rusty Pete. The dynamic with these two just works really well for me, with Pete being the pathetic sidekick that does nothing as Slag is the one getting everything done. Despite being reduced to the side villain that proves to be a minor nuisance in the way of the heroes, I still do find all the times when he's on screen to be effective at making him a viable threat, seeing as he's the one who sold the Dimensionator from Ratchet & Clank, as well as being the one who comes pretty close to killing them on several occasions. Still not a great character like the villains of the last several games, but I do find him entertaining with a fittingly over-the-top pirate voice provided by Robin Atkin Downes, although evidently he goes uncredited in this game, which is really weird for such a reoccurring character. Lastly, Slag's death scene is incredibly cliche, but I can't stop myself from laughing at it.
Captain? No! Why? Why? I suppose now that you're our new captain, you'll be needing one of them gimmicky pirate names.
That actually describes the humor in this game pretty well, all things considered, but I'll talk more about that later. Ratchet and Clank themselves have yet another feud throughout the story of Tools of Destruction, and I'm not sure how to feel about this one. I mean, it's good to show that these characters are three-dimensional by having them argue, unlike the PS4 game, but this is also the third time this has happened in the canon, and the thing they're fighting about is the existence of the Zoni, which, like I said, helped Clank out on a few occasions without revealing themselves to everyone else. Isn't this kind kind of like what happened in Size Matters, where Ratchet denied the existence of the Technomites. I just don't understand why Ratchet continues to not trust Clank in these moments. It just feels really contrived, seeing as I'm having a really hard time picturing a moment where Clank was actually wrong. Well, there was that one time in Ratchet 1 where he led them to being tricked by Quark, which set off their feud in that game, but beyond that, his instincts have always been on point, so I don't understand why this keeps happening. Not that it's hard to see where Ratchet's coming from, since Clank is saying he's seeing creatures that are guiding him around, which is pretty far-fetched, but still, he just kind of comes off like a jerk for no reason.
You know, Clank, just once, I wish you'd listen to your real friends instead of your imaginary ones.
However, there's one thing I'd love to address with this topic. I set this up in my Deadlocked review that I really don't want you to watch, but the point I made is that Ratchet and Clank being put through such a serious life or death mission really cements the friendship these two have. I buy the fact that they can be in fights and yet still joke around after the fact because they have been through so much by this point. That was what I really loved about Deadlock's story. They had to compete or else their heads would be blown up. Despite this, they still never turn their backs on each other, making the moment in Tools of Destruction where they reunite after a brief split, following the scene where Tachyon uses the Dimensionator, a very strong one. Another thing I don't like about this story, or really the entire trilogy as a whole that just gets set up here, is the idea that Ratchet has some grand backstory as the last Lombax destined to defeat Tachyon and the Kragmites, in addition to Clank having some connection to these ancient godlike creatures. I don't like it because I always thought the meeting of these two was just a coincidence, making Ratchet's turn from an unremarkable mechanic on Velden into the hero of the Solana Galaxy all the more engaging. Also, Angela Cross from Going Commando breaks this plot point in two. Apparently there's some kind of explanation for this in A Crack in Time, but the point is that I really don't believe any of this was the intention when making the PS2 games. But I'm going to talk more deeply about this in the A Crack in Time review, so I'll save it for then. As for the other characters in the story, I can keep this one pretty quick. All the character development you'll ever see for Captain Quark happened in the original trilogy, with him going from a fake hero who wanted nothing but riches to becoming a true hero at the end of Ratchet & Clank 3, where he came back at the last second to help Ratchet & Clank defeat Dr. Nefarious and save the galaxy. Following those events, he was still just as much of a coward as ever, to the point where Vox didn't even try to get him for Dread Zone. But he's still ultimately on the side of good, nonetheless. Or, well, his motives have always been a bit of an enigma to me, but still. Throughout Tools of Destruction, he helps Ratchet & Clank out, all the while working undercover for Tachyon. But at the same time, he's also the one who shows up out of literally nowhere to take the Dimensionator after the defeat of Slag.
Quark! What are you doing here?
Showing the universe that I'm a superhero. I'm also fighting the mother of all wedgies, but mostly the superhero thing.
Quark, put down the Dimensionator.
I shall now emblazon my name in the annals of galactic history by hurling this infernal contraption into a black hole.
He then accidentally hands it over to Tachyon, so basically I've never really had a good read in his character in this game, but he's still entertaining nonetheless. Think about it like this. There weren't many new avenues open to give Quark a character arc. I mean, there's always room to grow, however, throughout the Ratchet trilogy, Quark came to learn the ultimate lesson and became a real hero once and for all as opposed to a marketing tool. I don't know if there exists an arc that fits Ratchet & Clank so well that can top that. If you don't believe me, look no further than the awful Ratchet & Clank movie and tie-in game, where Quark has the largest arc in the story, and yet at the same time it makes absolutely no sense. Great work, guys. The last major characters are Talwyn Apogee and her robots, Kronk and Zephyr, and honestly I don't have much to say about them either. I do find them all to be likable, but nothing special. As the obligatory female companion, Talwyn's much better than Sasha from Up Your Arsenal since she actually has a personality, but nothing will ever top Angela from Going Commando, so I don't really know why they never brought her back. Talwyn does have a sympathetic motivation, seeing as she's searching for her father who went missing a long time ago. Personally, I figured he was dead, but again, there's evidently some closure to this in A Crack in Time, but Talwyn doesn't even appear in that game, so that takes quite a bit away from that storyline. As for Kronk and Zephyr, well, they make every old man joke in the book. Again, I liked both characters and found the cliches really funny, which is something this game's story does really well, come to think of it, but still, they don't have complex personalities to comment on. I'm not sure if this is a story issue or a game design issue, but one thing I really hate about Tools of Destruction is how this is the start of yet another Ratchet staple slipping through our fingers. One of the things that made Ratchet 1 and 2 stand out so well will be the random inhabitants that you encounter all throughout the games. In 2, what did this salesman on Uzla have to do with anything?
Welcome, welcome. If everyone could take their seats, we can proceed with today's demonstration. First, I'll need a volunteer. Anyone? Excellent. Your name, sir?
Ratchet. Hey!
Nothing. It just serves to flesh out the universe since we're traveling across the galaxy, and therefore seeing all kinds of different greedy inhabitants makes a ton of sense. If anything, that should be a given. You could argue that 3 and Deadlocked have this issue, but the reasoning was justified in my opinion. In Up Your Arsenal, the whole galaxy was at war, and so the fact that we don't see many inhabitants makes sense. Is it a bit of a letdown? Yes, but it does give us the chance to interact with our favorite one-ups from Ratchet 1 again. In Deadlocked, we were competing on a game show, so again, it makes total sense. It would have been nice to see some of the people who actually lived on the planets that were being unlawfully invaded by Vox, but still, there is a reason why we don't see anyone. Size Matters failed this test by a large margin. The inhabitants we do see are fine, but the problem is that there are hardly any in the game. Like, why are there no people on Poketaru when it's being invaded by robots? You'd think this would shake up the resort planet at least a little bit. Back on subject, Tools of Destruction is absolutely no excuse though. We're traveling across this brand new galaxy, Polaris, and despite this, we never interact with anybody. What was the point of going to this new galaxy if we don't even see what the society is like? We see Talon and the robots, but they're main characters. Where are the one-offs? Instead we get this guy, who is a smuggler and he has a parrot, and that's about it. Other than a funny moment at the beginning, I don't know what to say about him, which would be fine if he was the one-off I thought he was going to be. However, he appears every time you need something convenient. Seriously, this is the size of an entire galaxy and he appears to sell you something like 5 times. Sure, the Mystic appeared twice, and those were the amazing crystal hunts from Going Commando, but he had a personality worth a darn. More than twice is also pushing it for me, especially seeing as he has no reason to be in any of these places beyond moving the plot along, which no matter how many jokes the game makes at the expense of this, it is bad writing, point blank and period. What is the point? Why couldn't the other 4 times he appeared just be some other inhabitant that has an entirely different personality? This is also where we get the chance to make exchanges, giving him Leviathan souls, and from those we get bolts, which I suppose is a fine quest, but none of the areas hold as much depth as the desert from Ratchet 2, but the quest itself is fine. The writing has seen a bit of a tone shift from the PS2 games, and this is probably my largest issue with the story. In the Secret Agent Clank review, I highlighted what made the stories of the first 4 games so unique, for lack of a better word. Satire based on consumerism littered throughout each game with a fleshed out universe of greedy douchebags who want to nickel and dime you for all you're worth, at the same time with clever adult humor, likable characters, and the list goes on and on. I could praise the writing the old games had all day, but we're talking about Tools of Destruction here. The game still does retain much of the identity that works so well with those games. However, upon replaying it, Tools of Destruction clearly is the first in a long road towards making Ratchet & Clank plots more melodramatic or child-friendly and especially cringeworthy. I'm not about to say that adults were the target audience for Ratchet, seeing as I played the games as a kid, but similar to the Sly trilogy to a much larger extent, Ratchet was a series that appealed to the younger crowd with the art direction, easy to pick up and play gameplay, and funny jokes. But adults could appreciate the subtle writing that was in between the lines as well as the addicting gameplay. It's really difficult to pin down. The classic Ratchet games were just funny. Really, playing them again, I really just realized just how great those games actually are. But needless to say, the series did not go from this.
Of course. Just look into that camera right over there and say what comes naturally. Rolling!
Hi. This is Ratchet for, Gadgetron hoverboards. And if you,
Yo, dudes, for the freshest boards in the galaxy, check out the new XZ88 from Gadgetron. It's so hot, it's cool.
I think I got the wrong guy. That was something.
Hey, I was thinking, do I get a discount on gadgets now?
You have to be with the company for 2 years before the employee discount kicks in.
To this.
Here's your holo, guys. Do me a favor. When you use it, post your thoughts on the social medias. The kids love their social medias. Hashtag Gadgetron.
Overnight. Forgetting Secret Shit Show, Tools of Destruction is lacking in the consumerism satire that I love, but still, the writing is better than the sum of its parts. Seeing as the drama is pretty high stakes, and therefore I say they succeeded at what they wanted to do, for the most part. An example of this being done well is in the ending, where the Zoni finally reveal themselves and take Clank away from Ratchet. That scene still pulls on my heartstrings to this day, as the game ends with the fate of Clank unknown. What doesn't work for me is Ratchet being melodramatic about fixing a ship.
Clank, please. I need to fix her.
Like I said, the humor is still funny, just in a different way than the previous games. With the story basically covered, I have 2 little remarks to add. I like this 16-bit Ratchet sprite, probably because I'm such a Mega Man nerd, but it's a cool reference to Mega Man 7 nonetheless. Also, in the Lombax homeworld Fast Tune, we're given some foreshadowing for our cracking time when we're told about the Court of Azimuth, And that's all there is to say about that in this game, since again, the real meat of that comes in a cracking time. Moving right along to the presentation, Tools of Destruction has a very stellar voice cast, including the staples like James Arnold Taylor, David Kaye, and Jim Ward doing an excellent job since the material is more dramatic, and as a result, the performances reflect this quite well. New additions like Andy Morris as Tachyon, Paul Eating as Zephyr, Dan Hagen as Kronk, Tara Strong as Talwyn, and Robert Atkin Downs as Slag are also fantastic like they always are in their other works. Very well done cast that was not bogged down by random celebrity cameos for absolutely no reason like a certain movie I know, although the way the Help Desk lady introduces the Alpha Disruptor is all kinds of cringy.
Hold down the fire button to charge, then let go to release a galactic can of whoop-ass.
What bogs down this very well done voice acting would have to be a game-wide issue that happened to me in almost every cutscene. The audio will fail to load properly, and therefore the audio will then be out of sync for the remainder of the cutscene. And again, this is almost every single cutscene, which took a large percentage of the impact out of what would have been great scenes.
I see ye have something that belongs to me. Now be a good lad, and hand it over. Meet here a bit twitchy with the blade.
Aye, Captain. Say the word, and it's the locker for our friend.
Try to follow us, and I'll gut ye bow to stern. Gentlemen.
You could say my discs are old, and that's very true, so I planned ahead. 2 years ago now, before I started this channel, I purchased Tools of Destruction in a cracking time on PSN to avoid any issues like this, which would negatively impact my playthroughs of these games. Yet here I am telling you that this still happened to me. I also tried my physical copy, and that only made things worse. Weird thing being how, to my recollection, that has never happened to me before in any of my previous playthroughs of Tools of Destruction, but it happened in this run of the game, so I'm gonna address that fact. In addition to that, this game has numerous glitches. This has always happened to me when I play Tools of Destruction, and they never fail to piss me off. Starting small, on the Apogee space station, this door fails to load before the cutscene, and again, that's not a big deal. What is a big deal are the moments like on the lava planet where the screen is black following the space loading screen and nothing is happening, and yet I can hear some enemy sound effects. Yeah, I died before the level even loaded. Also, are they ever gonna stop using Mikey Kelly's Ratchet grunts? Just saying, James Arnold Taylor replaced him like 6 games ago. The worst glitch was on the Cragmite homeworld where I was playing the game digitally, like normal, and yet the game fucking freezes and I have to reset my console. The soundtrack in Tools of Destruction is very well done. I'd kind of forgotten about most of the music in this game on account of having not played it in years. However, compositionally, David Bergot had done a great job setting the atmosphere and getting me hyped up to explore, to go crazy with the weapons, or to take it slow and platform. Graphically, Tools of Destruction, like I said in the intro, is a bit of a PS3 tech demo, and it succeeded marvelously at that. The guys over at Naughty Dog and Insomniac Games have never failed to push the boundaries of what the PlayStation hardware is capable of, and games like Tools of Destruction are no exception. Not only has the amount of spectacle been increased dramatically from the PS2 games, but the lighting and shadows are just phenomenal. Not all planets look fantastic, however I do enjoy the looks of most of them. Fast Tune at night, the Crowley Comet, the gorgeous water and shadows from the trees on Jacindu, the rain on the planet Murkow, and the list goes on and on. Helping the graphics would be the incredibly smooth animations from every character, with the expressive facial animation that Insomniac's known for. In fact, the New York Times had even described Tools of Destruction as, quote, the first game to truly deliver the long-sought, you're playing a Pixar movie experience, unquote. Not only are the animations smooth, but the frame rate is a solid 60 frames per second, which seems to be causing developers so many issues these days. The biggest games in recent years have sought to deliver the highest resolutions console gaming has ever seen, but always have 30 frames per second, which I simply cannot accept anymore. Arkham Knight, Uncharted 4, and yes, even Ratchet 2016 are all 30 frames per second, when they should have just shot for 60 first and foremost, since while they may look pretty in screenshots, rotate that camera and you have a much different story on your hands. Point is, the Tools of Destruction not only manages to pull off 720p, a very high resolution for consoles in 2007, but keeps a rarely wavering 60 FPS as well? I'm impressed. Metal Gear Solid 4, Batman Arkham Asylum, and Infamous 1 couldn't handle that much. So good on you, Insomniac. Also, this game has connectivity with Secret Agent Clank, and trust me, don't even bother. I hardly even know what it is, I just don't want anyone to think about that game, so yeah, don't bother. This at last brings us to the gameplay of Tools of Destruction, and I see no better way to kick it off than by saying that once upon a time I read that Insomniac Games wanted to bring Ratchet back to its platforming roots, and if you're not in the know, then Ratchet & Clank was always a mascot platformer with a bit of an edge to it where you would go from platform to platform, yes, but at the same time also blowing enemies away with a crazy lineup of weapons. In fact, that was what the marketing for all the first 5 games was about. My favorites were the old Ratchet Deadlock commercials.
Thank you for being a friend.
Play your ball! Go! Get it going!
Your heart is true. You're a pal and it comes to done. And if you're through a party,
take your time, guys.
Gift would be for me. Thank you for being a friend.
Command robot friends not fit for this world. Rated D for teen.
Ratchets 1 and 2 had balanced this perfectly, however, starting with 3, the games had a higher focus on combat. Deadlock sealed the deal since in that game, platforming was more of an afterthought than a core mechanic. So how did they do? Well, I'm mixed. There are many moments early on that have a proper amount of platforming, like on the Apogee space station where you need to navigate through laser traps to get from platform to platform, or on Planet Macau when the level constantly makes you jump and grapple your way to new heights on a frequent basis. The amount of platforming in Tools of Destruction is a step up from the previous 2 games, however on the whole it's still not as good as Ratchet 1 and 2. For example, many of the last few levels have minimal platforming and are instead occasionally frustrating combat tours like the revisit to Fastoon or Meridian City. Levels like this really grind my gears, but that's better saved for later. I'm not trying to be arbitrarily nitpicky, but if platforming is one of their goals for this game, then I'm not sure why the game is so selective as to when you will and won't be doing it. The Gel Factories are great examples of platforming and puzzle solving combined, in addition to just being really fun to go through since it's inherently satisfying to go up so high. The town area on Riken 5 is also a fun mini area to visit and explore, but the first half of that level is just a shooting gallery. The level design is also pretty linear, which is not a problem per se in my eyes, because as long as we get a focused set of challenges along the linear paths, then I'm fine. After all, I still say that Up Your Arsenal and Deadlocked are better games than Ratchet 1, despite that being the more open-ended game. Mechanically, those 2 games are just better for me. However, when Tools of Destruction does have a level that is more open-ended, it's fantastic. Take Macau for example. Not only is this stage the level where the arena is, which is a great opportunity to grind for bolts and level up weapons since paywalls are back, but the level leading up to it was great as well. There are 2 paths. One's opened up by exploring the opening area for Tachyon statues, which opens a path to the theme park where you get to ride on rides and battle enemies, which leads you to the charge boots, a Ratchet & Clank staple. The other path being the one that leads to the actual arena. Other times the more open-ended levels can be meh. Take the dinosaur world for example. This planet is huge with the sole purpose of you hunting down Leviathan souls to sell off, but it's so big that flying over it's the most viable option, and there doesn't seem to be any landmarks here like in the crystal hunts from Going Commando. But at least it's better than the sewer hunt in Up Your Arsenal, which was just terrible. Speaking of exploration, Tools of Destruction brings us the next iteration of the Rhino from the original trilogy. In the original 3 games in Size Matters, as well as Deadlocked Rhino equivalent, these superpower weapons meant to break the game costed you an arm and a leg to get, so the most likely scenario is that you only would have gotten it on the 2nd or even 3rd or 4th playthrough. This game changed it up, and this is how it will be in each game going forward. You have to collect 13 pieces of the plans for the Rhino 4, and the smuggler will then put it together for you. This means that you're probably going to have the Rhino before the Tachyon boss, which is fine by me, seeing as I don't even like that boss, and I also don't like this Rhino since it doesn't even do a fraction of the damage that the Rhino versions 1 through 3 did and its other alternatives like the Bouncer and the Dual Vipers. Moving right along, the progression from level to level is a bit disappointing as well. Each world in the first 2 games had a story to tell on its own, and so this would lead to multiple pathways branching out that would end up intersecting because of the items you got. Like how in Nivalis you get led to both Iridia and Metropolis, so the choice is yours as to which one of those you get to visit first, but little do you know, the items found on Metropolis will be used on Iridia. Or how in the Mokhtar Resort in Ratchet 2 you'll be told about Clank being in trouble on Endako, so you can race to go save him or go investigate investigate the ruins of an old Gadgetron site and interact with the desert riders. Things like these made the games feel like an adventure. This is basically absent in Tools of Destruction. They go from one level to the next, learning something at the end which leads to the next level. While this isn't a big deal, it just isn't as good in my eyes. On the subject of mechanics though, Tools of Destruction's no slacker. The game has the best controls the series has seen to date. Just moving Ratchet around just feels fun because it's so smooth with every flip feeling satisfying. The control mapping is also the best the series has seen so far. The game adopts more of a third-person shooter control scheme, and when I say that I mean the shooting has been placed on the R1 button, which is incredibly comfortable when turning the camera around and shooting at the same time. Previous games had the shooting on R1 for the lock strafe mode in Ratchet 3 and 4, however here you can use the circle button like the classic games, but this new style is also up for grabs if you so desire. What I noticed right off the bat was that the first person mode's been removed, which I thought was a series mainstay by Up Your Arsenal. I wrote off the lock strafe mode and first person mode in my reviews of the classics, but when I played through these games again for this marathon, I found myself making use of these modes often for the comfortable button layout in the lock strafe mode, and I used the first person mode for being able to target enemies while on the run that I couldn't hit in third person mode or even lock strafe mode. Point being that I found it to be a bit lame that they removed first person mode, seeing as the Ratchet games didn't make for half bad first person shooters. We do have this over the shoulder aiming system, which I suppose is good for aiming at targets that would be hard to hit otherwise, but I don't find this very useful seeing as you don't move at full speed in this mode, thus leaving yourself open to being attacked, which is already an issue in this game. I think the real purpose of this was honestly to have a way for the player to take in the view, and that's about it seeing as I couldn't find much practical use for this stuff. The weapons and Tools of Destruction are great. At first. The fusion grenades quickly became one of my favorite bomb type weapons to use with a great range and it's quite powerful. Other weapons like the combustor and the shock ravager are pretty good. I don't have too much to say about most of the weapons seeing as they're all functional, and the new weapons like the buzz blades and the predator launcher are unique and therefore fun to mess around with. Other ones like the shard reaper and the plasma beasts are just, well, pretty bad, seeing as they hardly kill enemies, thus making the level up system take way longer than it has any right to. And another example of a bad weapon is the tornado launcher, seeing as you need to control it with the 6-axis and then it sucks up enemies. There are a few other sections that require the 6-axis, but thankfully, unlike games like Uncharted 1 or flipping Sly 4, we have the option not to use it in the options menu. That does make these moments more shallow, but it's better than using the BS motion controls. The hacking device in Tools of Destruction without the 6-axis is one of my favorites in the series, as you have to read the layout and carefully pick which path the spark needs to go on. As the game progresses, this gets more complicated with more options to trick you, so you need to pay attention all the while acting quickly. As the game goes on, a massive issue that hinders the game rears its ugly head. I really don't know why this is, but starting with Up Your Arsenal, they decided to make the enemies bullet sponges, which drags the pace of the game to a crawl. Let me give you some advice. If you want to level the combustor, the plasma beast, or the predator launcher, or the shock ravager up, do it early. If you're at Zordoom prison and have like a level 4 combustor, then that's it. You're not leveling up that thing ever again. These enemies have practically no reaction to the early game's weapons, even if they are at level 5. So then you have to rely on late game weapons like the Shredder Claws, which by the way are some of my favorites in the game. Really unique and fun to use, you have to get up close to the enemies and slash, and the more you do it, the more powerful it becomes. But if you get hit, it goes back to 0. Really fun risk versus reward system. Or other powerful weapons, including the Negotiator and the Alpha Disruptor, which are probably the only weapons that will lead to your victory against the final boss. Otherwise, much like the other enemies, he will take all day since he seemingly absorbs your attacks. This makes combat incredibly tedious at times. Tools of Destruction adds a new type of gizmo to the Ratchet & Clank formula, and that would be the devices. This is where the Groovatron and Mr. Zircon make their debut. Please, get them away from me as fast as possible. I mean, devices like the Leech Bomb are pretty useful for getting health, however, device vendors are rare and that discourages you from using them. They also don't level up, so that's another thing that deters me from using them. In addition to the Groovatron and Zircon just being stupid. Zircon just fights enemies for you all the while saying stupid shit about how he wants to kill, like, shut up. Honestly, I never thought Zircon was funny or worth bringing back, and again, he's more of the same meme humor the series continues to reuse and reuse. The Groovatron is also a dumb idea, making all the enemies dance so you can hit them. Sure, it helps during the annoying final boss and last few levels, but where's the challenge then? Enemies now stand no chance, and the only difficult thing about using the Groovatron is making sure your butter knives this game calls weapons will kill the enemies before time runs out. By the way, if you're wondering why I have a negative outlook on things like the Combustor or the Groovatron, the reason I hate them isn't the fault of this game, but let me just say this is not the last time we'll be seeing them. I hate how new Ratchet games will market around 1 or 2 new weapons they have, like the Snowman Gun in Into the Nexus or the fucking Pixelizer in the PS4 game, yet the originals would have a new roster of weapons in every game. But no, Ratchet PS4 almost 10 years after Tools of Destruction is still using the same weapons as Tools of Destruction. That's just lazy. Also, can I complain about the quick select ring? I find it insanely faulty when playing this game, and this never happens to me in any of the previous games. What I mean by that is that when I try to change weapons, I'll get the wrong weapon? I don't know how to describe it, but I'm trying to get the Alpha Disruptor to deal the final blow, but I keep picking the piece of shit pirate disguise. By the way, does anyone like this crap? It became pretty repetitive to me after the second use. Point being that in my playthroughs, the quick select has gone haywire on multiple occasions, and if a mechanic that's worked fine since Ratchet 1 is not working properly 100% of the time in this game, then that's a technical failure. At the weapons vendors, you can not only buy weapons, but now you can mod weapons, which was introduced back in Deadlocked, but has been taken to the next level here, by expanding the damage, the ammo, and the area of the weapon. Although clearly the damage one didn't do me much good. Going here will also completely refill your health, which I thought was the devs throwing me a bone, but no, this is outright required by the end of the game. That's basically because the difficulty in Tools of Destruction is broken beyond all belief. I was buying the best armors the shops would offer, but it did nothing for me, seeing as these enemies hit like a tank, killing me in about 3 hits. That's another thing I don't care for as Ratchet went on. Combine this with the bullet sponge enemies and you have one unbalanced game on your hands. Ratchet 1 had every enemy deal 1 unit of damage to your 4, possibly 8 hit health bar. However, with leveling up in the later games, what good is having a health bar at say 175 HP when 1 hit will reduce that to 64? That makes no sense to me. The camera also needs to come into question as well multiple times, seeing as I felt like I was being blindsided by things I couldn't see, like this part in the slag boss. The game is fine until you get to the iris level, but from there on I had to put in my notes over and over that this level here and that level there killed me like 5,000 times because I die in 2 hits. The weapons do no damage, and the checkpoints are worse than Jack 2. And that game gets all kinds of flack for that, but this game gets away with it. Oh yeah, that reminds me. The checkpoints are awful. And when I say checkpoints, I mean the lack thereof. Most planets start to only have 1 checkpoint in the late game, meaning they have to fight the same enemies over and over and over again. Clank sections being especially guilty of this, seeing as making a tiny mistake can result in doing the whole affair again. I would say more about these, but all I have to say is that the checkpoints suck, and I guess the Zoni are fine. I mean, we don't have to order them to attack like the Gadget bots, but really that's all I've got. Another mechanic I have little to say about would be the Star Fox styled space shooting sections. These are a pretty fun distraction from the main game, but nothing special. Seeing as unlike Going Commando, they're automated like Star Fox, and if you like those games, these should be fun for you. Personally, what I would want from controlling the ship in a next-gen Ratchet game is to be able to fly ourselves from planet to planet and explore tiny stars along the way. Anywho, a great example of terrible checkpoints would have to be the prison stage. You rescue Talon and then fight an elevator of enemies, followed by a hallway of enemies that kill you in 2 seconds. So every time you die, which will happen a lot, you have to redo the elevator. Did nobody playtest that and realize how bad that is? The absolute best example of this comes with the boss in Jacindu. I was ready to compliment just how much spectacle there was in the opening chase scene, and it is very well done. However, this boss kills you in like 2 or 3 hits, with the checkpoint being right before the chase scene. Meaning that if you die, which is very likely, then you'll have to sit through the whole thing again. Might I add that this section's not challenging in the least bit? And so once you've seen the spectacular action the first time, it's nowhere near as interesting the 6th time. This is the crux of the matter. What this whole review boils down to, basically, with numerous other examples throughout the game, like the final boss, the Crowley Comet, the Pirate Base, or Meridian City. All of which really do tear away so much of the fun factor I have when playing through this game. And now that I've said that, I think I found out why I don't really revisit this game very often. When I played it at the beginning, I was curious as to why I played the classics more often, but the late game was simply not that fun in my opinion. Getting older can be a pain sometimes. I was all over this game when I was 11, but here in 2017, I really felt like I was complaining about pretty much everything this game had to offer. In other words, this review sounds like I hate this game or something, but in actuality, this game is like my 5th favorite Ratchet game. The core mechanics are really well done. I said this already, but I try not to repeat myself in my videos, so why say in detail why the core mechanics of this game are fun when I have 6 other videos on the subject? This game may have a flaw around every corner of all of its new ideas, but the game is still incredibly fun to play, and the story is still enjoyable to watch. However, it's not perfect, and for that reason, I still enjoy going commando, up your arsenal, and deadlock more than this game. A few fixes would have improved this game quite a bit in my eyes, but maybe that's just me. Throughout the script writing process, I felt as if I was being too harsh about this, that, and the other thing, but I'm not gonna hide my opinions, whether they be things that have a massive effect on the quality or not. Like I said, this game was the start of a very long road towards the Ratchet I knew and loved turning into something I don't. But that's not something I really hold against this game, since like I said, very much of the identity of the old games is still here and accounted for. And as a result, this game is still very much worth your time, despite all the nitpicking I've done here today. But thankfully, the next episode shouldn't take too long, seeing as I'm reviewing Ratchet & Clank Future: Quest for Booty. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.